okay, so there's Twitter, there's Flickr, there's Facebook, there's LinkedIn, there's MySpace, if anyone uses it anymore. I mean, there's, there's Blogger, there's, we could get WordPress. I mean, we could go on and on and on. There's so many social networking sites right now. And a lot of people have accounts on a lot of these sites, and they sign up for them because they know it's going to grow their business, or someone's told them it's going to grow their business. But then when it comes down to the reality of it, if you look at, say, Twitter, for example, I was looking at some statistics, and the largest, I think it's ridiculously, it was like 70 or 80%. I'm kind of making it up, but it was a high amount.
Okay.
And the majority of these people have less than 10 posts on there. So people sign up, but then it's kind of like, okay, now what? So what piece of advice would you give people? What's the most important thing, once you've got all these social networks, or you don't have the social networks, what would you say to them?
I'd say it's kind of two-pronged things to look at. First of all, if you are using social networking for business purposes, for business growth, you have to figure out where your audience is. That's the most important thing, because one audience is going to be on one social network and not another. So, for example, if you are targeting high school seniors because you do high school senior portraits, they are all on Facebook. And then it's figuring out how to use the different tools of Facebook, like groups, like looking at different pages, like posting pictures and tagging people. You need to figure out those tools. Whereas maybe if you deal with architectural firms, you're an architectural photographer, the place for you to be is probably going to be LinkedIn, because then you can look up the people who are the heads of hiring photographers in different corporations, so that's more of a corporate realm. So to put that simply, figure out where your audience is and go to your audience. But if I had to say one social network that you really need, is you need your blog, because your blog is your branded identity. Whereas, I don't know how much you do Facebook. I'm a big Facebooker. My attention span is nothing. So if somebody pops up and asks me a question on Facebook, I'm instantly on their page, checking out their photos, answering questions to them. Whereas if you get someone to go to your blog, they're in your branded identity. They're looking at your blog posts, your photos. It's kind of your home online. And for me as a photographer, if you look at my website, I have, 20, 30 pictures on there as my portfolio. But maybe I only take one or two good photos a year, especially if you're a photographer who's been in business a long time. Whereas on my blog, I can show that whenever you hire me, you will get great pictures. So I can have updates and show that I'm always producing great content, and show a little bit of my personality, whereas a portfolio is just your photos. So I'd say figure out where your audience is and then drive them to your blog so that it shows your personality and the work that you produce.
All right, awesome. I was actually going to make a joke about only taking 2 photos a year.
Or 2 good photos a year.
I'm kidding.
No, I've definitely met photographers who have been in the business a very long time, and the portfolio they have up there is very dated. You can tell from hairstyles and clothing and whatnot. So if they had a blog that shows that they can still produce good work, that's helpful. So yeah, I don't know. I take more than 2 good photos a year, I hope.
and I'm sure your clients hope. No, I'm just kidding. But I think what happens is, as you progress, and you've been photographing for how long?
10 years.
So as you progress, your idea of what is good photograph changes. Because, you first shoot your first roll of film, 10 years ago, I'm sure you were shooting film. Mm-hmm. Every shot was great, right?
Oh my God. I remember that I once heard a photographer say that he considered himself successful if he had one good frame in every 150 shots that he took. I was like, are you kidding? You're a terrible photographer. Now when I do a fashion shoot, I shoot about 3,500 to 4,000, and I usually end up choosing about 12 frames from that. So now I understand what he's talking about. It's a lot different when you become to have a more discerning eye about your own work versus, oh, wow, it's in focus and it's still exposed. So it's a lot more difficult now.
Absolutely, and I agree. Because, as you get to see, as you get to learn how to see, you start to see things. I don't know about you, but a lot of the time I look at my stuff I did a couple of years ago and I'm like, oh man, I hate all of that. Mm-hmm. I wish I could reshoot it all. Do you ever have that feeling?
All the time. I mean, I didn't really start fashion photography until maybe 2.5, 3 years ago. And the stuff in the beginning was horrible. And a lot of what's in my portfolio now was shot in the last 6-7 months. So it's a huge turnover. And it's those things where you put a lot of effort into a single shoot. I mean, a ton of effort. The planning, it's a full day's work, at least a full day's retouching. And then when you have to eventually give it up and take it down off the portfolio because you have better work, it's hard to, usually I have someone else that I respect take a look and let me know when it's time for something to go. I'm always producing new work.
That's interesting you say that, because I think a lot of photographers, and not just photographers, I've seen a lot of designers and stuff too, and I mean, I do it myself. The portfolio suffers because people tend to put too many pictures up. And I don't know about you, but it seems if you review portfolios, like I know if I review portfolios, I'm looking at the strongest piece, but I'm also looking at the weakest piece and saying, wow, they're capable of creating this beautiful art, but they're also capable of producing something that's this bad. I mean, but a lot of people don't realize that, do they?
No, and I was told originally when I was in college that your portfolio should be maybe like 24 pictures at max. If the fewer you have, they basically said, okay, you need to have more than 15 photos to show that you can really consistently produce good work, but you want to have less than 30 because 30 shows that you don't know how to decide what the best is. So their made up number was like 20 to 24 really strong photos. I know I have more than that on my blog, but I have different themes. I have one that's fashion, one that's beauty, one that's I tried to have a nude one on there. And so I have it divided out. So they can each maybe have the 24, but they're separated. So people can look at what they want to look at.
That makes a lot of sense. So what about Flickr? Because most people, myself included, I probably have like 800 pictures on Flickr. But, I think maybe there's two schools of thought. Like, would you use Flickr as a portfolio, or would you use Flickr just as a fun place just to put up snapshots, or does that weaken your the way people perceive you as a photographer?
You can approach Flickr in a bunch of different ways. The most important reason you want it up there is for some reason it has amazing search engine optimization. So for example, if you search my name in Google and then you go to images, it's not the pictures that show up aren't the major interviews I've had with magazines or newspapers or podcasts. The pictures that it brings up are actually my Flickr pictures, not even what's on my blog or my website. So if you want your name to be associated with certain images, get them up there on Flickr and put keywords in it. And I think honestly, that's how a lot of my early publications found me, because I had them on Flickr, which then fed into WordPress, and that's how publications found that. My personal opinion is that you can create different sets and different albums within Flickr. I have a portfolio set, which lets people know this is my good work, this is my best work. And then I update, but I'm usually updating still good work. I put my snapshots on Facebook, but I wouldn't do the same with Flickr because it is searchable, so you don't want bad pictures to be associated with your name. So any good work that you produce, even if it's not portfolio, that's fine for Flickr.
That's awesome. That's really good advice. Because I think that's going to help a lot of people out there. So anyway, once again, I want to thank you for coming in, taking the time out of your busy schedule while you're here in sunny California, from
snowing back home,
snowing New York.
It is.
And, coming from a similar background as Walt Disney, because he grew up on a farm as well. And I don't know if you knew that. Did you know that?
Yeah, I did know that, but I don't know if that links us in too many ways. I was a lazy farm girl, really bad farm girl.
You learn good lessons that help your creativity and imagination, right? Because there's nothing else to do but imagine when you're on a farm.
I mean, in the summers, I would climb a tree and read for hours and then come down covered in sap. And, my parents thought I was crazy. And then once I picked up a camera, then my dad thought I was going to make him broke because it was still film. And I would shoot dozens of rolls and just go out and take pictures of mushrooms for hours. But it definitely it taught me how to see small things in different ways. It taught me how to look at my environment in a different way than my family or my friends, to see it as a photographer. And it helped me develop my own eye, and definitely made a difference in who I am today, certainly.
Wonderful. So people want to find out more about Lindsay Adler. Where do they go?
My website, lindsayadlerphotography.com, has my work, and my blog is blog.lindsayadlerphotography.com, and it has my schedule. I do a lot of blog posts. I'm doing a lot of inspirational ones, telling photographers to pursue their dreams, because I feel like people get discouraged very easily, especially in this economy. So there's a lot of stuff there, and I'm on every social network. So you can find me on Flickr, you can find me on Twitter, you can find me on Facebook, you can find me on my blog. And I try to interact as much as possible. So if someone sends me a message, I'll do my best to get back to them.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming in, and we'll catch up with you again soon.
Thanks for having me. Make sure you Facebook me when you're done with this.
All right. So it's Colin Smith for Photoshop Cafe, and we were very fortunate to have Lindsay Adler here today. And we'll see you next time.